the more you're talking to your people, the more you're engaging with your personnel, the less issues you're going to have. If you're asking a bunch of questions just because someone told you should ask that question and you're not doing anything with it, then you don't understand why you're asking the question and there's no reason to ask it. Take the time to give people some quality feedback and you will find that they rise to the occasion. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cheer Biz Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Cotton, and today we are going to be diving into why having regular meetings with your staff can reduce your having to yell at them by at least 50%. By the way, that's a completely unproven statistic. Now, if you don't know me, I own Oregon Dream Teams in Beaverton, Oregon. I also am the owner and founder of Dream Camps, and I am one of the owners of Next Generation Gym Owners Gym Owner Consulting Company. And between those companies, I employ over 60 people that I work with as employees. And I have a lot of reps at what it means to have an employee and what it means to do it right and what it means to do it wrong. So today we are going to be diving into why it is so important to have meetings. Now, before we get into the episode, please make sure if you're a gym owner, you've gone to Cheer Gym Owners on Facebook and you have joined that group. And if you are a coach or a coach and owner, you've joined All-Star Cheer Coaches and Owners as well. You are likely listening to this over the holiday break when most people are taking a little bit of time off from their gyms. So I appreciate you spending some time with me or maybe spending the new year with me. If we are in the new year, I am headed to Las Vegas for our conference, January 3rd through the 5th. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be teaching there. If you're listening to this before then, you might still be able to register. So if you still want to register for that conference, please head over to nextgenowners.com to find out how to register. I want to talk about this because it is so frequently missed or made an error by with owners in regard to their employees. And I was having this conversation with one of my clients and we were talking about meetings with staff, and they're hard. They're hard to do. And one of the reasons that they're hard to do is because a lot of us have mostly part-time staff. So people aren't full-time. So I know that like at the police department, when I was working full-time, I would walk in and if my sergeant said, "Hey, stop whatever you're doing, we're going upstairs and having a team meeting," guess what? I was stopping whatever I was doing and going upstairs for a team meeting. You don't necessarily have that luxury quite the same in your cheer gym, but in some ways you do. Like nothing actually prevents you from saying, "Hey, all of your classes are going to start 10 minutes later today. Everyone in here for a quick huddle." Now, would I suggest doing that? No, it's not a great client experience, but you are in control here and you can actually set things up to be successful. So I'm going to talk through not only why I think meetings are so important and will reduce your need to yell at, scold, punish your employees, while it will reduce that by at least 50%, but also how you can potentially execute this. So number one, why will it reduce your need to yell at them? Well, oftentimes what's happening when you're having to get on your employees about issues is what's really happening is there was a lack of communication. And if you listen to my episode about they didn't know that you wanted them to do it or how you wanted them to do it or when you wanted it done or why you wanted them to do it, if you listen to that episode, you've probably heard some of this before, but you need to be communicating with them regularly so they know what's expected of them. So they are prepared and they can move forward the best way possible to represent what they need to do for you. So those meetings will reduce that because or reduce the need to yell at them about it. Because oftentimes when you're having to get on an employee about those things, I would say the majority of the time, it's just because it wasn't communicated clearly. And so by having meetings with your staff, whether it be as an owner having meetings with your managers, if that's what you have in place, or if you're an owner having meetings directly with your staff or managers having meetings with your staff, whatever the case may be, having those regular meetings is going to make sure you're all on the same page. And that is going to help make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be seen and heard and understand how their piece of the pie relates to everyone else's piece of the pie. Like in general, it is very beneficial to have regular meetings. Now, when I talk about having regular meetings, though, I don't mean what a lot of people think of when they think of meetings, which is a general waste of time where a bunch of things, everyone just talks a little bit and there's a couple people who take over the meeting and kind of do the most of the talking and everyone else just zones out and plays on their phones, which you shouldn't do during a meeting, or they just aren't paying attention. I've heard of of companies that have a standing rule that if like you're in a meeting and things don't apply to you, it's not productive for you, then you should like get up and leave. I know Elon Musk has that rule. And I don't know that I would necessarily recommend that, but what I would say is make sure that your meetings are highly productive for your employees and try to keep them to 30 minutes or less. If you're going for much longer than that, you may have some really important things to discuss, and that's more of a training. But for just your general meetings, let's get them the key information they need to know and then get them out the door. So I will give you a framework for the way we do our all staff meetings. And then I'll actually talk you through kind of some ways to do this. So our all staff meetings, they're 30 minutes long. Everyone gets together on a Sunday. If they can't make it, they can hop in on Zoom, and we go through a slide deck and we start, and everyone goes around and says something great that's going on or some sort of good news, starting out on a positive. And then we go through, and each department kind of talks about the things that are going on for them. So they talk about what their goals were for the last month, what challenges they encountered, what goals they have for the next month, and what help they need from others to accomplish those goals. And then we go through that. Everyone goes through kind of their slide, and then we have ending discussion to make sure that everyone knows how they can impact one another's goals in a positive way or even a negative way, things to watch out for. And then we go forward from there. Having a meeting is great, but you also need to then check on it. So we're following up on those goals. And that's one of my jobs, is to kind of track those things as we move forward. So having those meetings, make sure everyone on staff is on the same page. We're all working towards the same goal. Now, other meetings I have is my head coaches. We meet weekly. So we meet every single week. On the weeks we have an all staff meeting, we don't meet, say go to the all staff meeting. On the weeks we don't, we have our head coaches meeting. And what we're going over that is things related to our teams very specifically, and going through those details. What do you need? These are upcoming things. This is how private lessons are selling. What kind of, what is it that you need to be successful? We do some collaboration. We also collectively read a book, and we talk about the chapters in those books and lessons learned from them. So we're doing all of those things in our head coaches meetings. And then on top of that, my class coaches, they have a weekly meeting where they discuss, hey, these are the classes we have going on. This is what enrollment looks like. Hey, these are some challenges we encountered last week. Let's make sure we're on the same page with those things. We also kind of do some different curriculum. So we vary our curriculum between focused on standing tumbling or running tumbling or front tumbling or a hybrid. And they have some flexibility in there, but that's to make sure that we have variety in our tumbling classes. So it's not just the same class week after week after week after week. And then we've found that reduces our churn. So they have a weekly meeting and they discuss those things and what they're going to be focusing on. And they make sure that they're talking about, these are some drills I want to do, so they can actually deconflict any like mat sharing or equipment sharing or things like that. And they do that on a weekly basis. And again, all these meetings, less than 30 minutes, super quick. If you can't be in person, use Zoom. There's so many different resources for it. And again, it reduces the need to get on your staff significantly. Now, the next thing I want to talk about in terms of being really productive and the tempo is, if you have directors and managers, you need to be meeting with those people in a formal meeting setting on a weekly basis at a minimum. That is absolutely critical. Now, the reason that's critical is because your manager should then be taking that information and going forward and accomplishing things throughout the week that are in line with what your goals are. Now, this is something that I'm going to be talking about in Vegas, where there's two different kinds of leadership. There's transactional leadership and there's transformative leadership. And transactional leadership is very much focused on give someone a task, check on the task, give them a new task. And transformative leadership is much more based around, how do I give my employees an objective and then coach them to achieve that objective? And I always want to be living in that transformative leadership realm much more than I want to be in the transactional. Now, sometimes I will have to be in the transactional leadership role. Sometimes it is just necessary for me to say, hey, I need you to go do this exact thing. Come back to me and let me know when you need something else to do, i.e. when we're at dream camps and we're setting up our 3 spring floors and tumble tracks and all that stuff, and I have staff who've just gotten there and they're helping set up. I'm just like, hey, go put those mats over there, come back and let me know when that's done. Or go organize this area, come back and let me know when it's done. And that's necessary. But then there are other situations where I'll say to my pro shop people, hey, your objective is set up the pro shop. get everything ready to sell, a good display, etc. Go forth and conquer. And then I'm going to check in and then I'm going to coach them. Hey, have we thought about tweaking this thing or tweaking that thing? And what about these things? Okay, go forth. And those meetings might happen throughout a day, but you need to be meeting with your managers at least weekly. Daily is even better, even if those meetings daily are short and you're just saying, hey, what's on your agenda for today? What do you need help with? How can I support you? How are you doing at accomplishing those goals? Yesterday you made this much progress, which is great. And then the day before you made this much progress, it was bigger. And then this next day you made a little less. So what happened? And then we figure out what kind of caused a problem. And then we help them figure out those problems and move forward. That's how we educate our leaders to be better at what they're doing. So meeting with those managers weekly to daily is absolutely critical. Now, I told you I would give you some actionable steps. I've been trying to do it kind of throughout this, but again, the moral of the story is the more you're talking to your people, the more you're engaging with your personnel, the less issues you're going to have. And I firmly believe that this requires actual personal communication, or at least Zoom communication, verbal. There were years and years ago where I had someone who told us that we needed to do an end of day report. It was just, if you weren't doing it, you were being reckless. And so we said, okay, we're going to do it. And so we did an end of day report for every one of our staffers. Every single person had to fill out an end of day report. It created a huge problem, like literally massive problem with a couple employees. In fact, we had one employee who essentially quit because of it, because they got so frustrated. And they got so frustrated because we were saying, hey, you need to do your end of day reports, but we were only checking them, once a week, and more just checking off, like, did they do them? Yes, they did. Not really reading through them. And people were making notes in there of like, I'm struggling with this thing, or I'm frustrated by that thing. And because we weren't in detailed reading them, or even if we were in detailed reading them, we weren't truly following up and taking the time to solve the problems. People were getting really frustrated. And they were like, why are you making me do this extra work? And you're not even talking to me about the thing that I told you is a problem. I believe if you're going to have things like a report like that, 1, you should have a response. 2, it should be a really quick and easy report. 3, you need to have a reason of why they're reporting those things. So if you're asking a bunch of questions just because someone told you should ask that question and you're not doing anything with it, then you don't understand why you're asking the question, and there's no reason to ask it. Like if you're not going to ask a question with a reason and you're going to do something about the response, you're just asking to ask, then don't waste your employees' time. But having those regular meetings is absolutely essential. I kind of gave you my format for my all staff meetings. Some other things you might consider. So you can meet with your staff monthly, you can meet with them weekly, or you can even meet with them daily. A way to meet daily is to do a huddle. Have a joint, everyone starts their shift at X time. We have 10 minutes prior to the shift starting where we do a huddle. This is something that I do with my Dream Camp staff. First thing in the morning, we quick huddle up. Hey guys, just double checking, so-and-so's doing this, so-and-so's doing that. Reminder, you guys have these games, just a quick check-in, ready, let's go, rock and roll. We even this year started adding some of those huddles in between rotations so we could have conversations about, hey, this team was struggling with that thing. Josh, they're headed to you next. So they were having a little bit of an emotional time. If you can help them out, right? We've started adding those things. It creates collaboration, and where there's collaboration and communication, you find more success. And then for that staff as well, because of the tempo that we operate at, we meet nightly. Now, some of that is just to decompress, but we also do talk about relevant things each night. And we do shout outs. So we recognize people for their accomplishments. Generally speaking, in my opinion, those kind of larger group meetings should be about at least 30% recognizing people for doing good work, even if it's not like a shout out situation, but you're like, hey, I want you guys to take note of what Sarah did here. And then you use that as a teaching opportunity. But like, we want to be recognizing the good work that we're doing and talking about positives. About 20% of that time should be very much like mission oriented, technical stuff of like, hey, make sure we're doing X, Y, and Z, scheduling, those kind of things. Then you should have a period of time for issues and discussion. And that ideally is at the end of your meeting. So as things come up throughout the meeting, if it's going to take a longer discussion, you table that until the end of the meeting when you get to that discussion point, and then you go through that situation. So Make your meetings highly productive. Make your communication with your employees be regular and consistent, and not just text messages and not just like, hey, how are you doing? How was your day? All those things. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about communication. I'm talking about really clear, how are things going with your classes. These are 3 things I saw you doing really well. I want to thank you for that. This is something that I think that we could be doing better as a staff, or you as an employee, or whatever it is, right? Take the time to give people some quality feedback, and you will find that they rise to the occasion. Most of your employees, when they're struggling, are struggling because they've had a lack of direction for a period of time, or they're burnt out, or something else is going on outside the gym. And you're never going to know those things if you're not talking to your employees. So make sure you are having regular meetings. It will reduce your stress. It will reduce your need to yell at them as much, and it will just overall make a major difference in your business and in your gym. I'm going to tell you one last story in regard to meetings. It's going to be kind of a harp on a point I already made, which is if you have managers and directors, which if you listen to my podcast that came out recently about why you might not want to hire a manager or a director, if you have a manager or director, you need to be meeting with them every single week at a minimum. And I'm going to tell you a quick little story of why. So I have a tumbling director, and he's awesome. He does a lot of things really, really well. But over the summer, I'm so busy. We weren't really meeting regularly. And then we came back and just things got away from us. And we recently had a meeting, and I was a little bit frustrated because he wasn't prepared and it didn't go great. Wasn't the best meeting. And this was one of our all staff meetings. And so I realized I could have option A was ream him, write him up, tell him, he failed. You didn't meet the deadline. You didn't do X, Y, and Z. This was completely unacceptable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was my knee jerk. At the moment, I was pretty frustrated leaving the meeting, as I tend to do. I calmed down, I thought, and I said, you know what? That's my fault. And so we set up a meeting for the next day. And I was initially going to go in a little bit aggressive. And then I stopped and I thought more. And I just opened our meeting with, hey, how do you think things went yesterday? How do you think your part of the presentation went? And I let him self-identify. And honestly, he's introspective. He's smart. He was like, I didn't like that I wasn't prepared and this and that and the other thing. And then it turned into okay, what can I do to help you in the future be prepared? And then it turned into a really productive conversation of these are the directions that I want you going as a director. And him talking about, hey, I don't feel like I'm still needing to get better at like managing people, which was great. Like this is all a great conversation. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken the time out of my schedule to meet. On top of that, I'll tell you another story, which is as you progress in business ownership, you are going to transition from being the technical person and building systems and building those things to building your people. And if you want to be really, really successful in your business, build your people. Build your employees up. That is not the biggest and best investment you can make, but one of the best investments you can make. The best investment you can make is in yourself. And then from there, it's investing in your people. And that could be investing your time and your energy to help them become a better version of themselves, because your people create an ability for you to scale exponentially when they are trained appropriately. So make sure you're developing those people. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, it was a pleasure talking to you. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season, a happy new year. And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode.